All good things deserve an encore. In the second part of our off-season discussion, the panelists discussed the necessity and issues with the repeated signing window delays, why they weren't communicated in a timely manner, the economic situation of the Overwatch League, how the league can be improved, and what we need to feel optimistic about the game going into 2023. Enjoy.
Now, of course, one of the reasons why we only meet now is because of several signing window delays that presumably were important to competitive integrity. And the reason given was that, of course, like currently not much is figured out in the APAC region. And to a degree, we felt the impact of their volatility in terms of the just, influx of talent in the NA region. I would say like the level of talent noticeably rose across teams from the signings that we knew. I'll also say of those we don't know about, that trend definitely keeps going. So I guess let's start out and try to steelman that decision of trying to delay the window. So the initial, like, when you saw the window approach, were you like, okay, there's no way this is going through because, I mean, I'm competing against nobody from APAC right now in terms of like these players because they can't make moves? Anyone want to take this, Brie?
Why would you think that I was competing with these guys? It was, I think, as we got closer, all of a sudden voices got quieter. There was certainly a period where like everything felt normal. And then there was kind of a point where all of a sudden, there's you talk to people and they have back and forth, and they'll either explicitly say the other team that they're talking to, or they'll kind of in vague generalities. And then there certainly was a point at which it felt like I wasn't there was no one on the other line. And so I definitely felt that, and yeah, so there is room to kind of steelman the fact that there obviously was enough uncertainty that it did impact their ability to have those conversations, at least the beginning of the delay for sure.
Right. Now, of course, we had several delays, and one of the maybe not so nice circumstances around them were that they were delayed, and we only found out pretty shortly before the window closed that this was going to happen. I remember the OAM, Overactive Media representative Adam Adamu said on Twitter, like, that's how it's supposed to be done, right? Like, you have to make these decisions pretty late and then to communicate them late. Okay, whatever, right? Like, what did you agree with that take, Grant? Like, did you think, okay, like the timing of that? Do you have to make that decision close to the window?
I think it's not an easy question to answer off the cuff. So I have a lot of thoughts and feelings toward this. I think leaks, not necessarily to you, but leaks in general have been a big issue is probably the wrong word, but a big issue, a big thing that happens across esports, not just in Overwatch, but LCS, League of Legends, Valorant, take your pick. Leaks are a reality that I think every publisher, every league has to deal with some extent. I think there is a certain amount of uncertainty that always exists when you are operating kind of a startup business anywhere, right? And I think this is the kind of a point that gets overlooked pretty often, where the Overwatch League is run, and Call of Duty League and many other esports leagues are run very much like a startup, right? Despite being the part or being a part of, much larger corporation, Activision or Blizzard or Riot. They are smaller staffs. They are fighting for resources internally. And so, yes, I think it's entirely plausible that as a startup business, you find out kind of late down the pipeline that there is something that is going to massively inhibit or impact your ability to pursue a competitive product in the APAC region. I think the second piece, though, and where I struggle with, is we've had this issue for 5 years, right? Or 6 years now, right? Where we know there are a number of actors across the league and across other leagues and esports products who leak things. And we've basically done nothing to fix it, right? It's been kind of a continued situation where the solution has been just share less, just share less, just share less. And if you just eventually don't share anything, or you share it so close to the time when you actually announce it, well, then nobody can obviously leak it. I think that is not a very fruitful and productive way to like have a long sustaining path forward as a league or as a product. And I personally would like to see us invest some time and energy in finding out who's leaking it, right? I think almost all of us on this call have signed NDAs. We've all, agreed to contractual obligations that say we will not leak things, and we will, have our team's best interests at heart and follow the rules and obligations of the Overwatch League. Like, it shouldn't be this massive undertaking to find out, to some extent. And Yiska, not trying to put you out of business or anything here with any of this, but like, there should be a level of interest and effort that is put in on both the kind of fellow teams level as well as the league level to find people who do this, so that we can have kind of this open communication, which would resolve and kind of prevent situations where teams are finding out kind of very short notice from major decisions. Again, not suggesting it's easy, not suggesting it's a perfect solution, but there have been use cases in traditional sports. I think the NBA most notably had one of the most interesting ways of weeding out leakers with kind of the different documents that they sent some players and some teams or whatnot. So there are ways to do it. It's just a matter of, can you take the time and put the effort into finding out what is happening.
Okay, but what kind of damage could be incurred through getting that information at a prior date?
Getting the information that we are delaying the
yes.
Well, I think if one team has it before others, that's certainly problematic, right? Teams are all operating. You want kind of competitive integrity in terms of when teams are able to actually sign players, and a team might feel pressured to sign someone sooner rather than later if the window is earlier versus later than they expect. I think that is kind of the date or a decision that it's kind of a formalized guideline. Right? You really can't have teams finding that out before others. Now, the question here could be shifted a little bit in terms of what is the harm in teams finding that out 2 weeks before the public. That one I struggle a little bit more with. I don't know if the other panelists have thoughts around that. Maybe that is not as big of an issue. I mean, again, you always kind of think of like, if I'm the league, walk through a scenario where teams find out a piece of information, it happens to leak to the public, you kind of don't have a chance to control the narrative or explain why the decision is being made. What is the possible repercussion? I don't know. That's not a thought exercise I've kind of gone down, but I don't know if others feel strongly about why that would be problematic or not.
Any ideas what the problem would be? Anyone? Like why you wouldn't tell? I mean, it's fair enough if you can't, or if you're not communicating at the same time. I would say that's a competitive integrity issue that the league shouldn't do in the first place. But like, what's speaking against like sending an email 2 weeks prior? Because let's be honest, this wasn't an issue that was going to be fixed. To my knowledge, it's still not fixed. So why not just inform people? I understand that you want to make these decisions incrementally, but the information on that and having everyone plan around it certainly impacts the market, does it not?
Yeah.
Right. How does it?
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, just think about the off season starting like 2 months later, and you not paying salaries for those 2 months because you don't have anyone on your team. That suddenly gives you extra money for the season. If you are a team that had like 5 players signed, then you think about dropping them because you're like, okay, I don't want to pay 2 months for nothing, because the league is going to start later as well if they're delaying everything. So I feel like there should be some communication so teams can make like economically sound decisions. But I get that it's not easy to kind of forecast like what is going to happen. There should at least be kind of a heads up though that like a delay might come at some point. I feel like that's
Yeah.
the least that we should get.
And that stuff doesn't, as far as like leaks, that doesn't leak as much either, right? Like if it's like a hard thing, like, oh yeah, like in 2 weeks, this will be pushed, this will be the announcement, these will be the repercussions. But just like hey guys, this is like trending not great. Like that doesn't really get leaked, and even if it does, fans don't really get excited about that.
No. Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
almost like, just from my point of view, almost not worth the effort of reporting that.
Right.
So the the other, of course, thing we have to talk about is what the impact of this repeated roster, signing delay did. I would say there must have been some deals, and I'm not sure if any of you want to disclose if that happened to you or you know of someone that it happened to, but where player signing fell through because maybe the player found out that there was a better opportunity because APAC is starting to sign, have signups, or like there was a budget moved here and there, or maybe the org decided, okay, actually we reconsidered the market situation and we will be able to have better players for the same budget. Do you think this really impacted how the market moves? Pri?
I don't think too much. I think like most GMs, myself included, kind of came out and said, conversations were had, verbal agreements were made. There wasn't too much of a shakeup. I think most of the repercussions were like, effort is a weird way to say it, but it's like to Barroi's point around like, I mean, even like earlier in this conversation, we talked about like more players going to collegiate, right? Like a player that was expecting to be signed at a certain date and then all of a sudden doesn't get a paycheck for 2 months. Maybe he goes to college because he's like, oh, this is like not money I can count on anymore, or this just isn't going to be enough for me to justify this. Like a potentially like a sponsor that you wanted, if you wanted to bring a sponsor on, a sponsor was really excited to, like, our roster announcement just hit 2 million views on Twitter. It probably will be one of, if not our most popular social posts of the year. And if you had a sponsor that was lined up to be excited about that before Black Friday and then leading into the Christmas season, and then it gets pushed, and it's like, like that's tough. So I don't think I don't want to, I won't get too far into it. I don't think there were too many implications on the player side of things. I just think as far as, we're all sitting here as GMs that want the best sustainability wise for the league, I think that's where it hurt the most. Not least of all, like asking people to work 2 days before Christmas. Like that was, there's employees we're trying to keep in esports too. And that was not a check mark on the right side of the column there for that.
Also has kind of repercussions for like everything else, like trickles down, right? Because we had all contracts, probably most of us sent the contracts in like right on the day off. And then they have like, you go into the holiday season, which like delays checkups on the contracts, which delays like other questions that we're having because they're still working on that thing. And then just like everything kind of gets delayed. Like every checkbox that we have to like communicate with the league is like just furthers and furthers to delay just because they can't get enough stuff done beforehand with going right into the holiday season.
I mean, presumably for practically all players that entered free agency, the salary consideration now changed significantly, right? Like if you're not being able to be signed for 2 years, and I don't know how many orgs are willing to add that on top on your annualized budget or salary, especially because it has implications for the option years, presumably, unless you negotiate, which is a little bit wonky. What I mean is like maybe you take the annualized budget and like make it higher the first year and then lower the second year because you're trying to make good on the 2 months you've lost. But it feels like the people that most got shafted here were actually players. And if you round up the numbers, like there's actually a large amount of player salary that the league as a whole saved by not being able to sign players during that window, right? So were your players grateful for having signed pretty early, Barroi?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone. I mean, for me, the biggest thing that the whole delaying thing did to me was that it gave me stress because I was like, oh no, I felt like we had our roster somewhat together pretty early, and I was like, oh no, now all the big fishes are coming in, and are stealing like my juicy little.
All right, so I feel like it's my constitutional duty to be devil's advocate here for like 2 seconds. One, as like the one team that was like pretty fine with the delay because it basically did nothing for us, except give us time to decide on a head coach and GM. Like it was fine for us from that standpoint. But the I agree with the other commentary around like the economic impact really is on the players, right? Like, but the one step beyond this year as like an outlier for it is like the bigger question of should players be paid in the off season, right? Which is like not a super fun conversation that like anyone wants to have, and like I'm not suggesting that we need to have it here, but like there's like a pretty strong argument around the idea of like if you're signing a player in November and like scrims don't start in February, like what are you paying them to do? And I'm not saying that some players aren't worth it. I'm not saying some players don't deserve the compensation they get because like you're preempting another team from signing them. So like you're locking them in. So like it's worth paying them for that. But like it is not necessarily the standard in traditional sports or other esports that like you get paid for an off season with arguably like somewhat like limited responsibilities, if that, right? And again, like should that be like a strategic decision? Should that be something that the league kind of sets in advance? Should that be something that's like thought through? Like we're gonna have contracts end November on grand finals, and like contracts start on this date, right? Like of course, like obviously that would give a lot more planning freedom to teams and players and would make a lot of sense. But yeah, I think you know I just want to be cautious around the idea of suggesting that like there was some sort of like incentive to delay free agency for like saving money. Like I don't think that was it. I think we all recognize there were a lot of extraneous circumstances in APAC and everything that like the league decided to push free agency, and for whatever reason they decided to do that. Like that's kind of on them.
I think the other side of the coin then logically has to be, okay, why am I paying players in the offseason? Why is there nothing to do during that time for those teams, right? Why are we presumably looking at another 5 months off season, right? Noukky, why, like, do you feel bad about having to pay players during that time? Do you think that time is probably needed, or it would, it would buff out in the types of offers that you were going to make anyway, because the annualization of those salaries would, just be dictated by the market. It would just be much more in like a talent industry, like how that's then day rated and whatnot. Like, would it just, normalize anyway? Is that not a fear at all? Or, like, is the other side of the coin equally important? Do we need more stuff to happen in the offseason in order to justify having a roster on payroll during that time?
I think how it currently is and how the seasons looked the last like few years, there's kind of like two arguments to be made where, yeah, one of the arguments is like they don't do much during the off season for the brand itself, but like for us as a team if we pay them through the off season. But then there's also the other side where it's like some of the players still stream, some of the players still like have appearances in those like off season times if the team chooses to do so. There is like still the expectation that I have as a GM or that the coaches have for the players to like keep up with the game and to practice like the individual skills and to like still put time and work in outside of like just like chilling and like doing whatever they want to. So a player not like keeping up with what is happening in the scene and what is happening like with the game is still like would not be worth paying, but a player that does, you can make an argument that it's still worth paying them. There could be a system in place like some teams or like some like other sports have, with like a off-season salary versus, or like a sub salary off-season salary versus a on-season salary, which would like mitigate the hit a tiny bit, where like you don't put as much work in as in the regular season. I guess don't put as much work in as in the regular season, but you still put work in like in other areas, so you just get the slightly like less compensation, which also softens the blow for the orgs, like to keep players on the roster or like to sign them very, very early. So yeah, that's where I'm standing.
I think one big point there is that players are still working, right? That, like Noukky
Yeah.
said, they're still like playing the game. They have to, otherwise they'll fall off really quickly. There's just, it's not visible. Like nothing is visible. So in that sense, the orgs are paying again for there not to be like, there's no content around it. Like you have to think about, like, if a team has a content team as well, they're not working much. Their social media team isn't working much. There's nothing to do really. There has to be an off season, obviously, for like having visas and stuff being taken care of, and getting contracts in place and all of that. But maybe it's just a little bit too long in the last few years, where I mean, you could argue that you could get a lot more out of it if there was like a little mini tournament or two where you can play remotely and it's just for fun, or maybe there's a really small prize pool where players could compete for your team, and then you have some more visibility for your brand. That might be an easy fix. I'm not sure.
I mean,
We could start doing like friendly matches against each other.
Yeah.
For
I mean, look at-
instance,
look-
A quick open scrim, perhaps.
Yeah,
I
quick
mean,
open
look,
scrim.
look at COD though. Like we got what, two
Yeah.
teams here who are in CDL. Like look how much they moved up their season. Like Daniel Sai and that
And
gang.
also,
like,
if you look at COD, they also have tournaments during the off season. Like,
Yeah,
and
it
those have
is-
a lot of prize money.
and I get it. Like we don't have an annual release to tie Owl to or Overwatch to, but like, you know, there just isn't a need for like a 5-week or 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is, off season. Like it just doesn't benefit anyone.
Doesn't have to happen. We just need some stuff to fill the time a bit more efficiently than just, even if it's a month or two initially for like contract negotiations and like getting your teams together. There should be something like a lead
Or
into
even
the season,
faster.
which also builds.
I'd sign up for a 3-month off season.
Yeah.
2 months for visas.
I wouldn't have a problem with just 3 months.
Like one month
most
sign
teams,
1 month sign players, 2 months for visas. Done. 3-month off season.
most teams sign players like pretty quickly towards the signing window. Like
That's it.
I don't think many teams like get their last player last minute.
It makes the in season more interesting, right? Like maybe you'd have more player movement, maybe you'd have more player trades, like you feel a little less certain in kind of the decisions you made, but like 3 months.
Spread the
If
season
that-
out, get a little bit better patching schedule with like some more breaks in there to kind of iron those things out. Yeah, I think it's you can do it from both ends. I think I would want it to be both shorter and more structured. Like the Calling All Heroes tournament was awesome. It was awesome that the Justice and the Shock were involved in that, and to the point of like, we have social staff that we want. Like there was a lot of really cool social and design work that went into that. That was like, getting people reps, and then that keeps your social channels relevant so that you can sponsor stuff. There was the Run It Back tournament that was sponsored by Esset, right? Like there's money there. Like I don't know how much that was, but maybe that offsets some of the proper salary from him being brought from one season to the next. So yeah, I think it's an and, not an or, right? We can definitely work harder on the league side and on the team side to create more stuff, to create value in that time period. But even if we did all of that, I still think 5 months is too long. Like that's a lot of content to fill. Like we can probably do that in 3 months and then feel a lot better about getting something back for the salaries that are spent in that time.
I think that that is the other side of the coin, where you have to say, yeah, the off season is long, but there's also like theoretically there's some burden on the teams that to not just host tournaments, but find ways for them to make that economically feasible, right? Like presumably it was worth it for the Shock to announce their roster in that particular way. It was arguably like a pretty innovative way to do just that, right? If every team monetized the whatever attention you get through those signings by having activations in that way and having a much more even spaced, especially also from a journalistic point of view, it feels weird that we're looking towards leakers to save an off-season when all the content is inherently in the team's hands. So is it just impossible to make that economically feasible unless you have like a sales team like the Shock?
I mean, even then, like, what are the Shock doing now? What are they gonna do for the next 3 months?
Right.
That is like one piece. Like,
yeah, to be clear, there should never be a situation like teams should be competing for like one-upping each other in terms of like accruing more of a pie that is already economically feasible for everybody who's a piece of the pie, who gets a piece of the pie. There should never be a situation where every team is losing out during the off season in terms of economic viability or feasibility, and you have one team or a couple of teams who manage to make it work. Like that is not a sustainable business. Like it's great that Shock and Dallas figured out how to do whatever that thing they did was like good for them, but like it is not the team's responsibility to find an off-season format that is economically viable. It is the league's responsibility to create a product that is economically exciting and attractive to the 20 teams who invested in it.
Right. Now, that's seems to be the name of this off-season. And once again, whatever inability to sell we've had in terms of the competitive product, it's once again arguably fout on the players' backs. Do you guys have a rough estimate of how much lower the average salary probably is this year than in prior seasons? What would you? Is it single digit percentage? Is it 15%? Is it 20%? Anyone want to take a shot at this? Come on.
I do not have
Hard to
any
say,
idea. I just
right?
know
I don't think anyone wants that one.
Right. Right. So the
what was it for 2022? What was the average
it's hard
salary?
to
in the
say.
Overwatch?
I mean,
I don't know.
we haven't had an official number. I think since
What was it for
2020.
2021?
Since 2020, we haven't had one.
What was it in 2020?
101K, I think.
I mean, you're asking a lot of the four of us to.
Yeah. Right.
Can we just go back to like inability to sell? Like, guys, this is not like a throw Activision under the bus here, but like, who has no sponsors right now? Well, sorry, London, but I think you have Microsoft. Cloud9 has Microsoft, or if they're coming back
That's
or
true.
not. Who on this call has no
Yeah.
sponsors? Not Boston, not Vancouver, not me, not London. Pending
Gel
Microsoft.
blasters, man. Gel blaster guns. Come on.
Who has no sponsors right now? The Overwatch League. It's Activision. It's not us, right? Like I think when you're pointing at inability to sell, like let's talk about the entity that has control of the broadcast assets, control of the media rights, control of basically whatever they want to sell. Like it's their job to fundamentally commercialize the product that they are leading and creating, and it's on us to do the best we can in our local markets. But I think make no mistake, like you have four teams here. I think Vancouver, Boston, and us, like minus Shock and Dallas, like are probably pretty up there in terms of commercialization. And it's hard to point the finger at us and say, hey, we aren't doing our jobs when we have great partners who have stood with us for a number of years now.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
I mean,
and like, someone's gonna watch this later and be like really upset from the league office or whatever. It's like, fine,
You're gonna
go
get
sell.
aggregated. You're gonna get aggregated bad, man.
I know. Go sell, right? Like,
should
go
Yeah,
sell.
look at other esports products. I mean, usually a lot of
It's
esports leagues have like
crazy,
multiple
and it's
contracts.
not unique to the Overwatch League. Like CDL has the same issue, LCS has the same issue, LEC is probably the best commercialized league product, and largely that's due to Riot's outsourcing to Lagardère and Sport. Well, I guess it's Sport 5 nowadays. But when you think of leagues and their ability to commercialize, like we need to do something different. Like the idea of selling an esports product in the same way you sell traditional sports, like, State Farm analyst desk only gets you so many dollars, right? And at some point you need to leverage teams. The reason I got into esports and the reason I think a lot of us started working in esports was there is no playbook. You can create unique and innovative partnerships with brands who want to reach, the millions of Aarons and Noukkys and me's out there who are, 18 to 34-year-old, and we spend all our time on this thing. Find a cool way to reach us. It is not through a State Farm analyst desk. And I apologize for State Farm. They're probably going to cancel my insurance after this. But like, it is not through having 4 talking heads on a State Farm analyst desk for 20 hours a week. It's just not. It's through TikToks. It's through shorts. It's through whatever, content people who are better at this than I am come up with.
What specifically do you think the league needs to be better then? Because I feel like if we're looking across the pond, especially like in terms of how Riot does it, there always seems to be there can be pretty drastic changes. Even like at this point, for instance, when the recent news hit that Dash was no longer going to be with the LCS, my initial reaction wasn't this is probably stupid. It was, I'm now intrigued what Riot thinks that could do to the broadcast and how that's monetizable. What do we need to, in terms of how do we change this product in order to make it more attractive for advertisers? And what are we selling that is unique to Overwatch, and how do we package it? Free.
Aaron's face every time you pick on him, man. It's brutal. He's just like, God, it's me.
It's like I do the thing like in like grade school where it's like you don't make eye contact with the teacher, and the teacher's like, "Ugh." Which that's your background, right? It's good. You got some teacher's chops in there, right?
True.
Anyway, yeah, he knows. I was that kid. Yeah, I mean, I go back to why I joined the Overwatch League, and I found this model compelling, specifically tying things to cities. Like, I really viewed this as the answer for how does esports make the jump to be on ESPN, to be something I can talk to my dad about at Thanksgiving right next to the NFL. And it was localization and tying that into, I'm a Celtics fan, I'm a Bruins fan, I'm an Uprising fan. And so I still really believe in this model in that way. And it's a bit of a tangent here, but one of the things that I'm actually really excited about that I would view as like a potential solution to the Overwatch esports kind of equation is really digging into collegiate, and it's double down on what we're doing right now. Like, I think this is something Grant and I actually spent a ton of time with the Justice working on, was trying to create like exactly to Grant's point. Like, okay, if we want to go into this and we want to say, like, what's something nobody else has done, I think what Shock did with O2 Blast, really cool, like a really good proof of concept for kind of creating a farm system. I think you take that and then you add collegiate to that. And the collegiate system is amazing as far as like how well it's funded, as far as how the international reach. Like, a lot of these schools have international students, and we talk about like broadening things that way. You kind of tap into merchandising and all of these things. So I think there are ways to grow this. Like, I call me a romantic or a sunk cost fallacy, whichever side of that coin you want to fall on. But I think there are still redeemable factors here that we can kind of tap into. And I think it's doubling down on what made the Overwatch League cool in the first place, as opposed to, like, I mean, like, we can look at what other leagues are doing, and like, yeah, there are like things that they're doing that are successful, but I personally don't think that the path to kind of getting the Overwatch League up to where we all hope it's going to be is by following what other people are doing. I think it's by kind of continuing to trailblaze, and I think we've kind of moved away from that recently.
In my mind,
I have hot takes only, so
right.
I want to go last. But if anybody else wants to answer this question,
I really like the idea of like a better like feeder system. Like, I've been basically fighting for like the whole like academy tier 2 contenders whatever system for like years before I like stepped into the GM role in Overwatch League. And it's something that is like fundamentally missing from Overwatch, and it's something that is so important to build up to like have a healthy scene. And I think we're
Well,
still
also,
like
I think
very
it's fair to say it
undervaluing
went
that.
from what, like best in class to the state it is now, right?
Yeah, and the collegiate scene has so much potential, like preset. It's like it's a scene that is there already, and it's a scene that has been supported from the start, where we as teams don't necessarily have the issue of like investment of for academy teams. Like schools are there already. The system is there, like the players are there. They have like a incredible reach already without needing to force teams to have an academy team or like have an academy system. And so like it just makes sense to me like to integrate that like a tiny bit more.
Barroi, do we have
You
any?
can go ahead, Grant. No.
Okay.
Oh God. Okay, so Aaron took the answer for redemption or saving the current state of Owl. I think I have to take, and Arnold's not on the show, but Arnold, I think he's what, CEO of Gen G, right? He's like most notably out there for saying like the current model of esports doesn't work. And like the longer I've spent in esports, the more that I've come to agree with him. And I haven't told him this, and if he watches the show, I'm sorry, Arnold, I probably should have told you this sooner. But I think you have to give up. Like I think you give up on media rights, you give up on sponsor dollars from a league perspective, ever being major revenue drivers, at least for the next like 20 to 30 years. And this is like a very painful take. It's a very painful idea to like, think about the idea of, 50, $100 million, whatever it is, going away from the league. But I don't think it's coming back. And so like, sorry, Aaron, sunk cost fallacy. If it's not coming back, you only have one choice. Either you adapt and come up with a different revenue stream or revenue streams and adapt, or you die, right? And so I think the idea that, publishers have been incredibly reluctant to creating MTX or cosmetic opportunities that truly create meaningful revenue streams to teams. I would love if we took all the sales efforts, and again, I'm not advocating that we fire people, but like take all the money we spend on selling sponsorships for the league, take all the money we spend on trying to get media rights for the league. We're probably not going to get them out of Twitch or YouTube at this point, or if we are, they're going to be marginal. Make a skin a team for like every month of the season and sell it and make it cool. Let teams design whatever the heck they want. Give me a skin, give me a gun charm, give me a spray, give me whatever that I can put into the hands of the 20 million or 25 million, however many people play Overwatch, and let me sell it. And let me keep 25% of it or 50% of it. See how much I make and sell it for, 100 Overwatch League tokens, 150 Overwatch League tokens, whatever it is. And I want that developer time instead on a per team basis. And look, I'm not an economist. I'm not doing the math right now. And somebody much smarter than me should do the math at some point. But do the math and see if teams come out ahead. See if the league comes out ahead. Just put it all into in-game digital cosmetics and see what happens.
I think it's a really good take, because if you look at things like Halo, things like Valorant, where they had like something similar for a Valorant with their championship skins, specific to like the Champions tournament, and like with the partner teams in Halo, it was a huge revenue stream for the teams that were participating there. Like I can mainly speak to Halo, but it made us a lot of money with our C9 team. And it's like it's an avenue that I feel like Blizzard in general doesn't really utilize in many of their games.
It requires a publisher to truly operate a separate P&L for their esports property, because you need to allocate dev resources to a product, the digital skin for a team, that will make you less revenue than if you made the same digital skin minus the team IP for yourself. And that is a painful equation. And that's something that needs to be structured. It needs to be as part of these teams and these owners and everybody investing money. You're gonna supplement it. It's the same way that you would supplement via rev share or whatever else. I think that is truly the only way you get long-standing longevity in esports. Media rights will come and go. Corporate sponsorships will come and go. Teams will continue to sell. You can put as many broadcast assets as you want. You can put us in game, maybe that's another viable kind of extension of the product. But you need to give teams meaningful digital in-game items with a real revenue split.
In essence, it's interesting, like how framed it's in terms of like the localization, and Grant sort of took it into the virtual space. In my mind, if
you can
right.
you can have both. You can
Right.
keep localization. To be clear, I'm not advocating that you kill localization. You can keep localization alongside that.
The thing is, right. The thing is, if I'm thinking of first steps, it seems like with the way, home offices are shaping, maybe like virtual spaces being used, generally speaking, this more scalable and long-term, like I think there's more reason to be bearish on that than, people buying into the localized model, because then you're only selling to the local markets, right? So one thing that I rarely hear...
No, sorry. Second hot take. Localization has helped Overwatch more than it's hurt it. Because without localization, you end up in a situation like LCS or LEC where every team is competing for the same sponsors. And it becomes this incredible bloodbath of like, oh, you're not G2? Like, you have no sponsors, right? Like, how many sponsors does SK even have left in LEC? How many sponsors CLG is a bad example because they have Madison Square. How many sponsors does FlyQuest have? I think FlyQuest actually still has no sponsors, which is crazy. And I'm sorry, Papa Smithy, don't come at me. But like, you cannot, localization unlocks local sponsor dollars. I think the Overwatch League, if it overcomes NCDL and other leagues that have localization, they overcome this kind of painful period of time that we're in now. In 20 or 30 years, we'll be thankful they kept localization, right? They will be excited that you have built this local business, that when Overwatch is hopefully, or Call of Duty is, a household name that can sell out a stadium of, 10 or 20,000 people in every home market, you will be thankful you kept it. It is painful now and maybe a little bit limiting in terms of national dollars. But if you built an MTX economy or digital skin economy alongside it and kept localization, you end up in a better spot in 20 years than you do now. Than if you get rid of it now.
Yeah, I think it's an and, not an or. And I think it's two good solutions to two very different problems. Like, I think like as far as like Grant's solution to like a revenue stream solution, I really like that. I think that makes a ton of sense. I think what I'm talking about as far as like the collegiate and the localization, what excites me about esports and the Overwatch League is the chance for the Overwatch League to grow outside of just the player base. Like for fans watching, like they might not realize that like a very hot topic for us is talking about who watches Overwatch League that doesn't play Overwatch. I watch the NFL. I don't play football. I watch the NBA. I haven't played basketball in 15 years. But the Venn diagram of people that watch the Overwatch League and play Overwatch the game is probably much closer to a circle than we would like. And I think for me, what localization and college sponsorship, what that unlocks is it brings esports to the next level. We're not just playing in this pool, which is granted like a bigger pool than it used to be, and it's a growing pool of, to your point, Yiska, people at home that play video games and that we can sell these skins to. That is absolutely, that's kind of like your market of who you're going to make money off of. But as far as, down the line, getting on ESPN, getting advertisers, I think that growth to me needs to break outside of just the, we're just marketing to players that are playing, people that are playing the game.
Right. Now, I guess one thing, and I'm not sure if this is a hot take, but for the longest time, we've had or the league had the excuse that you could say, okay, or the implied excuse, the game's not being updated. It's really hard to inject novelty in there. The vast majority of the draw that we have is the game coming out. And like whatever we do on the league side is like a multiplier on the health of the game. Now Overwatch 2 is out, and I would argue that player number, while not being solved as a bottleneck, is much wider. And it feels to me that the esports content could now be the new bottleneck. Because also even if we're saying, okay, we're doing the MTX integrations and whatnot, it feels to me there's a very different quality in terms of what kind of esports content fans engage in Valorant and how they are engaged with those players and what it feels like to support these players and how much more they are streaming personalities and all of that in comparison to whatever product we have on the Overwatch League broadcast. Now, this is not, trying to personally attack anyone on the team, and I'm sure like having limited resources and being told no is a demotivating experience. But I guess, Noukky, are we bottlenecked now from the esports content perspective?
Can you rephrase the question a tiny bit? I think you
Right.
got lost in like the
Right. Do you think we have the new game? We have a much larger player base also because of free to play. Presumably, the viewership should go up. We saw that through skin integrations. Is esports content and the quality we put out also in comparison to other esports the new bottleneck? Do we need to do better in terms of esports content?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I think how newer games like Valorant, for example, like monetize their players and the content they put out, it's like just feels like so much more of like tying the people and faces that are like known values to the product than we do. Or like than Overwatch, like I don't want to say ever did, but definitely it's like a higher quality content than we did, since we had like the whole like travel and then being more like in different areas. When it was still centralized in Burbank, I feel like there was more of that being had, but now that it's more on the team responsibility and like less on the Blizzard responsibility, it fluctuates too much. It's not like a baseline that every team has, but every team has like their own resources for it, and so it's like we as an esport itself don't monetize what we have too well and tie it too much to the product itself. I don't know if that makes sense. I might have gotten lost like somewhere in the middle there.
That's fine. Barroi,
I think it makes sense. I don't know how to. I'm not a marketing guy. I'm not like good with social media and shit. But I feel like we are not really good at identifying what our viewer base is and how to engage with them. I would assume that like nowadays most people, or like most young people who would like be engaging in esports stuff, would use TikTok, for example. So maybe that's something where you want like a TikTok person to work on the Overwatch League to literally make like clips of players, or in whatever way you want to advertise them on that particular platform, because it's a huge deal for those younger generations. And I feel like it's just about identifying where you can reach people, and then the next step would be try to figure out how to reach them and how to tie that in with again sponsors or whatever. For example, I brought up TikTok specifically because I don't use TikTok. I don't know. I don't like TikTok, but our team got 30
We saw
million...
your TikTok profile. We know you're huge on TikTok.
Our team got 30 million views on TikTok last year, which is a big number. And you would imagine that this has some kind of influence on what sponsors you can get, because if you have a fucking logo in your TikTok video that gets like 1 million hits in a week, then I would assume sponsors would like that. So it's the same for the league. If they identify how to reach people and how to make it, how to tie in sponsors, then that is something that they have to explore. And I feel like that's one of the biggest points that we are lacking right now.
Yeah, as somebody that worked both in like the Valorant scene and the Blizzard / Overwatch scene for like last like 2 years now with our female team that we had for a while. It's so interesting to see how much Riot invests into like endemic content around their game, like how often they like requested my players to fly out to content shoots, I compensated them for doing so. And like how much money they invested in like having people at events that are like from their own endemic social teams that are doing content with my players that goes on like the Valorant NA like TikTok or goes on the Valorant NA YouTube channel and stuff like that, like telling their stories, not only like us as a team telling their stories, which we also like did our due diligence for, but also the game and product itself telling the stories of key players that they are picking out to be like faces of their league or like faces of their like game itself is like so vastly different in terms of investment.
Yeah, I mean, but sorry, this is not turning into a defend Activision or Blizzard
Oh, no.
statement here, but like, what's the one biggest difference between Activision and Riot?
The current sponsorships probably like the money that they have for doing so. No,
No, next guess.
I'm bad with this.
Aaron knows
Somebody
the
else
answer.
go.
Aaron
Aaron,
knows
go.
the answer.
Go for it.
No, you tell us,
Okay.
Grace. It's your story. You got it.
I'm picking the phone joker and I'm calling Aaron. Let's go.
Activision and Blizzard is a publicly traded company. Riot is not, right? Riot is owned by Tencent and has very different outlook financially in terms of how they view esports, how they need to return, capital back to investors. They are also not the target of a $69 billion acquisition by Microsoft, right? And I think this is something that is very hard to quantify. Like, if you're an Activision employee or a Blizzard employee working on the Overwatch League or the CDL, you can't really come out and be like, hey, like, actually, I really can't do anything because, we may have a new corporate overlord in like 6 months and they don't really know their outlook on this product or this thing or this game or this league, right? Like, they're buying us, but like, if you think about how big the Overwatch League or the Call of Duty League is in terms of like the grand scheme of an acquisition of $69 billion, like, not that big, right? I mean, it's big, but it's not like, a majority share of that or whatnot, right? And so I think it's really easy. And I think esports does disingenuous is the wrong word, but esports is really good at just like looking at different publishers and just nitpicking everything that one publisher does versus the other and being like, why don't you do that too, right? Like, as soon as Halo launched their esports program, it was like, wow, they had skins for every team and a partner program. Like, why doesn't every team follow HCS and 343? Then 343 didn't update their game for 8 months, and it's like, wow, like, I'm glad we're not 343, right? Like, it's so easy to look at these publishers and not be a member of the team, not be a member of a league, not be like an executive at those organizations, and realize like every publisher is its own business, its own unit, has its own objectives, and it's going through its own thing, right? That trickles down inevitably to how they view esports and this esports product that like very outspoken, passionate people like all of us are doing podcasts about or shows about, right? And that fans are hearing about. So again, very easy to look at Activision, Blizzard, and be like, wow, would love them to fly a bunch of Overwatch League players out, do a bunch of things like Riot does for Valorant, but like realistically, I understand why they can't. I hope it changes, right? And I think there is a real opportunity where if the Microsoft deal closes, you see, a lot more money go into the scene. Equally, there is the chance you see a lot less money go into the scene, depending on how that acquisition goes and whatnot. And I think that's something that all of us are going to have to deal with. But fundamentally, I think there are often ulterior motives that are not always top of mind for folks when they look at, well, just like, hey, why didn't they fly Boston out to this event?
But
sorry, Aaron, you're not.
And understandable. That's like way out of my line of expertise.
Isn't like the argument though that there should be an incentive structure to not have it just silently depreciate, which is happening, right? Like, we know that the initial evaluation that everyone bought in for is not currently being met. It's not cut in half, but it's close to. Like, isn't that depreciation and like that inaction likely to cost you more money, and therefore there should be some investment? Or, I mean, the alternative is to just kill it, right? Like, I feel like the inaction is probably the least rational or, I guess, shareholder happy making strategy here. No? Grant?
Yeah,
or Prey, if you want to.
Yeah, I was gonna say the answer that I was gonna pose to Grant's question, I think his answer of public versus private company is kind of supersedes mine. But I was gonna say how you're viewing the esport. I think Riot views their esports as marketing. Like they view it as this doesn't have to make money. Like this can lose money and it can still achieve our purposes. And I'm not sure if we have that define an identity with the Overwatch League yet. And so that's kind of the biggest gap that I'd like to see us address on that side of things.
Like finding the identity for the Overwatch League, like where we want to slot into as an esports.
Yeah, and so I mean yeah, not even as far as esports versus other people, but to
Probably like
Yiska's point,
what's the point of having it?
yeah, but I mean it's okay to lose money, right? Like it's okay to for an asset to depreciate if it's losing money and some other goal is being achieved, right? Like I love to use the example in the NBA of the Hornets, which Michael Jordan bought, and the team was garbage, and he kept the team, and it continues to be garbage, and they for the foreseeable future will be garbage, but because they exist in the NBA, and the NBA is as a league is just going gangbusters, his investments doubled. So he doesn't care if his team's garbage, and so he's probably not going to change things there. And it's the same with this league. Yes, the depreciation of the asset, we could view that as outright bad, but is it coming at from what I can see, there is not for the average team a trade-off that justifies it. But it would help if we had a definition for what our kind of goals. Like if the goal is just making money, then yes, it's bad, right? Like that is a bad thing. If the goal is just every one of these teams should be breaking even or better, we should be making money, that is a bad thing. But if this is viewed as a marketing arm to get people into Overwatch to play and to Grant's point, buy skins, to watch and consume advertisements and get rev share. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do think in the current environment, to my knowledge, it is a bad thing for the average team.
So, what about the short term in terms of what would you like to see that's reasonable that should happen during this season in order to, still see an upwards trajectory here? So one of those examples could, for instance, be we saw a huge uptick in viewership during the playoffs because of those viewership incentives. Should that just be the baseline? Because, I mean, as well as we can tell, that's helped CSGO, brought it back from the brink, right? So, Grant, is it straight?
He has opinions. He has
Why
opinions.
do I have to go first on this?
You're emoting too much for that,
I'm
for me not to
emoting too much?
divide.
Alright,
Yeah.
sorry, I'll sit here stoically.
Yeah, I mean,
Steve Jobs, what is this? The power, power pose or whatever. Okay, let's start with viewership incentives. I mean, somebody smarter than me in data can determine. I don't know how much of viewership was driven by the playoff viewership incentives. I hope it was all legit. I hope it wasn't paid marketing. I have no idea. I just have the viewership numbers that were reported to everyone else. If there is a true correlation between viewership incentives and that level of viewership, then yes, you would want to naturally carry those viewership incentives forward for as much of the season as you could, somewhat caveating for some amount of viewership fatigue, and at some point people are going to earn the incentives, so you probably can't have them for the entire season. Sorry, the second part of the question was around what do you want to see this season? I mean, that's a huge question. I think there's a lot of small pieces that go into positive signs, right? I think, again, I go back to a clear definition of strategy, right? Either there's not that we're going to label them the Aaron and Grant routes, but there is the traditional route of we are going to excel at following a traditional sports structure, in having a media rights partner and large corporate sponsors. We are going to return revenue share to teams. We are going to provide some sort of ROI to teams that are significantly competitive, and we're going to give more broadcast assets, and we're going to have a plan that looks like that for the next 5 years. Great. Let's commit to that, do that, hope it works. Alternatively, is the path, hey, we couldn't really sell media rights this year. We didn't really have any corporate partners. We're going to go all in on MTX. I'll coin it the Arnold path. Gotta hope he watches this or something and doesn't sue me for using his name at this point. we're gonna go the Arnold path, have a bunch of MTX. Like, great. Like, let's commit to that, and like, let's see how many skins we can pump out. Let's see how many people buy them, what the revenue to teams looks like, and again, try to provide some ROI to being competitive. And I think all of this under the backdrop of like, let's be nimble. Like, let's think about like, does it make sense to have permanent franchises under the backdrop of like what Valorant is doing? Like, there's a lot of power around like having these temporary slots, like providing real KPIs to teams, incentivizing teams who want to be in the ecosystem versus teams who maybe are more lukewarm about it. Like, let's continue the conversation and like somehow, and this is maybe my like biggest takeaway, and I'll shut up so everybody else can talk, is like get everyone back to being like partners and like friends. Like, I don't know how you do that. I think like when you're 6 years into a league and you've had some of the challenges that Overwatch has had, that CDL's had, you've had some of the buy-ins, you've had some of the projections maybe not live up to what people had hoped for. Like, how do you reset everything? Is it like a come to Jesus moment with like, you know, a retreat somewhere in the, like the Wisconsin wilderness? Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's like the solution, but like you need something that gets everyone back to being like, look, like you have, and I still fundamentally believe this, like a world-class ownership group between Overwatch League and CDL. Like truly intelligent people across a wide variety of businesses. And if you can't find success working with them and being one of the biggest publishers in the world, we are all wasting our time and doing something wrong. And I just hope that we all get on the same page and do something great, like which is what I think all of us want out of working in esports.
Right. Bro, is there anything like
A
short?
little more than like an easy answer for what I want from this year. Just like, can I get that under a tree or something? Or like, you know, Santa Yiska is gonna bring me that, right?
Right. Right. So short term, in terms of you know, whatever. Is there anything else that anyone else wants to contribute in terms of, you know, content they want to see, or any, you know, other maybe some broadcast aspects, something that they feel like is uniquely Overwatch that we need to hone in on in order to, you know, maximize our engagement on these particular things that we are good at?
I mean, I think just keep people engaged, right? I think Overwatch 2 gives us the opportunity that suddenly there are more people back playing the game, so keep the game fresh, and just hopefully keep it exciting, because that's one of the big issues that Overwatch 1 had. If you can keep the game exciting through patches and through new content in the game, I think that would kind of trickle down to the Overwatch League. And in the same sense, I think it's great that they are bringing back, that Blizzard is bringing back the World Cup. It's something that is unique to Overwatch, and I think that brings in viewers again. Having that tied to teams is also great. You know, like this one guy played for my favorite team, so he's on the Canadian team now. I want to watch them. It's always, it's good to have those extra little products that just keep those extra byproducts that keep Overwatch itself and the Overwatch League exciting.
Right.
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Go on. Did you have?
No, I was just gonna add, like, kind of, I think one more facet to it. I really liked Grant's sentiment. I think one thing maybe that we can challenge each other with is, you know, Grant mentioned like everyone getting back on the same page. One of the things that worries me the most is the relationship between the Overwatch League esport and the Overwatch League developers. Like it has leaked out a couple of times. I think, you know, Dante might have posted a Reiner statement or two in these kind of developer forums, but like it's not great. And you know, I've probably been in there and been frustrated more than once myself. So, you know, I'm part of the problem and I can try to be part of the solution. But I think a lot of the things that we're talking about boil down to improving that relationship. I think that like we have a really awesome captive audience of QA testers in the Overwatch League, and like to Barroi's point, like it would be awesome to get a little bit more transparency on a patch if we saw a bunch of Overwatch League players playing on it, and they can figure out like that when something is broken, and you can see them instantly swap to that comp and just start abusing the crap out of Sojourn because they're like, oh, this is so broken. I can just abuse people with this. And then to Barroi's point, then we throw that on TikTok because it's hilarious, and then and we get benefit there. So like, I would love in like the very short term, and that's one of my personal goals for this year is to try to like mend that relationship a bit. And that, I mean, that this loops all the way back to our call as far as like leaks and stuff, like getting everyone back on the same page. Like we shouldn't be leaking things from the devs because that hurts them. And I mean, it cuts both ways. Like we don't want things leaked from the team side either. So like, I think mending that relationship is really important to me. I think that's a quick and easy win that kind of you can see the knock-on effects of that from basically everything that we've talked about. Making that relationship healthier would be great.
For sure. Then, with, proceeding hours, I thank the panelists for sitting down with me to discuss pretty tumultuous off-season, and wish you the best in preparation for the rest of the year, or starting with the preseason. Thank you.